the godly kind, so pure and
Yes, good morning, Mechanicsville. Yeah, this is Don Curtis, and it's another great day that God has made for you and for me. I'm going to rejoice and be exceedingly glad in it. Yeah, I'm excited about today. I hope you are excited as well. Good morning to you. Good morning.
made us from the very start.
Yes, your original was designed by Marianne Rappe from out of South Africa. We thank God for her song and even the words to the song. I hope you listen very carefully what she's saying in her song. Original design, the way God made you and the way he made me.
In which we'd been made, Christ became for us wisdom from God, the unmixed knowledge of our original design.
Yes, good morning, San Antonio, Texas. We have some new listeners there, and we just thank God for those that are listening to us out in that part of the U.S. We just give God thanks and praise for you this morning. Yes, good morning to those who listen to us in London, England. We have new listeners there as well. And Ashburn, Virginia, we thank God for them. Right here in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and Atlanta, Maryland, down in southern Maryland. We just give God thanks and praise for our listeners there as well. In Wilmington, Delaware. Yes, we thank God for you. Yes, we do. Yes, it's a beautiful day that God has made for each and every single one of us. Yes, it is. Laurel, Maryland. Yes, Waldorf, Maryland. Yes, Upper Marlboro, Fort Washington. We thank God for those listening to us all the way out on the West Coast. San Jose, California. Yes, Redmond, Washington. In Lowell, Massachusetts, we give God thanks and praise for you, those that are listening to us. In South Africa, yes, in France, we just give God thanks and praise for you this morning as well. The Lord is good. Yes, he is. Those that listen to us right up north of us in Canada, we thank God for you. Australia and Spain, we tip our hats to you this morning. Netherlands, we thank God for you. Those in Brazil that are listening to us, and Japan, good morning to you. Good morning. Original design, Marianne Rappe. What a tremendous song that Marianne has put together, original design. And I tell you, I'm excited about this myself. This encourages me as well as it does anybody else to be able to just talk about how God designed each and every single one of us and the value of human life. Yes, we live in a time when it appears as if the value of life is kind of debased, where we really don't value, where persons don't value human life the way it needs to. And so you and I to be able to, first of all, value yourself, to look at you and to consider who you are and just the fact that you're so unique that right now there's about 7 billion people on the face of the earth. And you are distinctly different from everybody else. Yes, there's so much that we share in common, but then there is something that's special about you. There's something special about me. And I believe that God wants us to know that, to understand that even though you are one of a billion, one of 7 billion, that there's so many on the face of the earth this day, that you're still special to him. Yes, that you're still unique to him, and God doesn't want you to lose your uniqueness and to downplay just how important you are in the whole mix of things. And sometimes just going through the ordinary things of life, we can lose focus of the fact that, hey, you know something? There's nobody else like you in all the universe. There never has been and there never will be. And time can go by so fast that you really don't have an opportunity to enjoy your uniqueness and the diversity that God has made for you and for me. And there's some people that are just, I don't know what the right word is, but they just can't appreciate differences at all. They want everybody to be like them, to act like them, to talk like them, to look like them. And that's really not what this whole creation is really all about. You don't want to lose your distinctiveness trying to be like somebody else, or try to fit into somebody else's mold, try to be defined and labeled by different boxes and categories that people will try to put all of us in. Yeah, and so, as you and I have been just even considering Jesus Christ himself and not only his uniqueness, but the fact that his teaching, his whole persona was just radically different. He didn't fit in anybody's religious boxes at all. In fact, he didn't fit in anybody's definition or understanding of what God was like. Yeah, I mean, he just blows everybody's theological constructs and whatnot out of the water. When he came along, he was so radically different in their interpretation and understandings of who God was and what God was like, even though they had been dealing with God down through generations and whatnot. When he became flesh and dwelt among them, they couldn't understand him at all. The darkness couldn't comprehend them at all. They didn't understand who he was. They were just blown away. In fact, they were so far off the mark. They were so distant in their thinking and understanding about who God is and what God is like, that they accused Jesus of being a blasphemer and being demon-possessed. In other words, they got the devil confused with God. They were so far out of the box, they were so far removed from the reality of who God was, that they were labeling God the devil. You got to be messed up in your thinking. You've got to be messed up in your mind. You've got to be so far deceived and fooled and tricked that you would be looking right at God in the flesh and call him demon possessed. That's more than crazy. That's a word you can't even describe, particularly when this is done by the Pharisees, by the religious rulers of that time, by those who should have known better, because after all, they were so versed in the scriptures. They studied it backwards and forwards. They went to school and they gotten their degrees and all that kind of stuff. And they were just so far out of the loop. Yes. So just because somebody got some degrees and been to theological study and school and that kind of stuff and got their DD degree and all this kind of stuff, that don't mean nothing. That might mean you need to be leery of them, because they might be just so far out of the box that they might not even have any idea at all about what Jesus Christ really is about and what God is about. In fact, it was so different that Jesus stood up different times, said, nobody knows who my Father is. Nobody really understands what God is like, and nobody really knows who I am and what I'm like. Really don't know. And so don't get blown away and don't get impressed because somebody got a whole bunch of initials behind their name, because they've been to some prestigious theological school or whatnot. Don't take that as a sign. In fact, put a star beside that, because history has shown us that those are the folk that really don't know, really don't have any idea. So you take their word not only with a grain of salt, but maybe a whole box of salt. You study for yourself, and I tell you, we're seeing it. And we're getting ready to move beyond this interaction that God has with this woman that was caught in adultery, and this interaction that he has with her is just mind-blowing and at the same time eye-opening. It gives us some better understandings and seeing God in a light that the Pharisees didn't see him at all, and the Sadducees at that time didn't see at all. The scribes, those that in authority, didn't see that at all. And I would dare say that even today, that God is interacting and mingling with persons in such a way that even today, that there will be religious leaders that just are caught off guard because they have gotten God boxed up, they've gotten him labeled, they have him confined to their little theological constructs, think that their mind and their understanding is broad enough and wide enough and deep enough to be able to comprehend and understand the magnitude of who God is, that they can't even get close to being able to accept this kind of revelation, this kind of understanding about what God is like as he reveals himself to all of us. And we just give God thanks and praise for how he does that. And so he really pinpoints what this lady needs more than anything else, what this woman needs. And he tells her, go and sin no more. And I tell you, we last time spoke about just the authority and the just the magnitude of the word of God, Christ speaking to her, and all of what I imagine that did for her, that here was God speaking into her life, words that she had never heard before. And these were more than just some verbs and pronouns and adjectives, but this was the creative power of God himself in the lips of Jesus Christ speaking to her and telling her to go and sin no more. And we just mused on the fact that, hey, we're dealing with somebody who created everything that is seen, was made by him. And so here he is. He is speaking to this woman and saying to her things that she never contemplated before, things she'd never heard before, that would introduce thoughts in her mind that she had never contemplated before. Yes, and I believe a life that she'd never lived before. Because after all, Jesus said he's come that we might have life and have it more abundantly. And I believe he spoke this kind of life into this woman. And so she went about from this point forward being the kind of woman that God designed and made her to be. Yes. And then, as we have said many times, that Jesus had begun this teaching. He had went in the temple and sat down, and he was teaching persons, and he was interrupted by the Pharisees and the scribes that had come, who had caught this woman in the very act of adultery and brought her to him. He was in the middle of his teaching, and they just interrupted him. And we're grateful for the interruption because it provided great understanding for us. And also for those who were there, who were present and heard this and saw this with their own eyes and heard this with their own ears and saw how Jesus dealt with this woman who had been caught in adultery, and where they wanted to extract punishment and judgment and even death, stoning, because that's what their interpretation of the law of Moses called for. And, of course, they wanted to trick Jesus, so they wanted to know, well, what do you say? Moses has commanded one thing. Are you going to agree with Moses and with us so that we can execute this judgment on this woman? Or are you going to take a whole different stance altogether? And so it was in that context in which Jesus was speaking, and they brought this woman to her. And so verse 12 of chapter 8 of John's Gospel, he goes back to what he was teaching to those that were around him. It says, then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. And so he goes back and begins to continue on with his teaching with the persons who had come together in the temple. And so it's a marvel how this interruption happens. And again, I'm thankful and glad that the interruption took place, because I've had an opportunity to see God in action with this woman who was caught in adultery, and so much learning and understanding and wisdom comes from that interruption. So we, once again, we're thankful for that. But he turns back around and says, look, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. And again, before we even go further into this or anything that Jesus says, we must always kind of go through this process. Well, go through any process, but we must keep in mind that, we can either believe that Jesus Christ is speaking the truth or he is a tremendous liar and deceiver. And if we believe that he's a deceiver, that he's a liar, then we don't have to take what he says at all. We can just know, hey, he's exaggerating. He's talking out of his head. He's saying something that's really not true. So we can dismiss it. We can hear it. It might be a good little thing to hear for a while, but we just move on. But now if we are serious about Christ and we believe that he is not a liar, but he is speaking the truth, then we pay attention to what he says. Yes, we give him that respect that, wait a minute, I believe that he is not a liar, that he does not exaggerate, but rather he does speak the truth. If I believe that's true about Christ, then I'm going to pay attention to what he says. I'm going to listen to every word that comes out of his mouth. And if I believe what he said about his words, that his words are spirit and their life, then I'm going to pay even more particular attention to every word that comes out of his mouth. I want to hear what he's saying, and then I want to understand what he's saying, because I know that his speaking can impact my life. Yes, it can have a dramatic positive influence on my thinking, on my attitude, on my actions, on just my life, on how I live, how I go throughout this day. In other words, it can impact our day today. You can have a tremendous bad start of a day, almost like you got out of the wrong side of the bed, so to speak. But you can hear something that Christ says to you and just change that all around, so it doesn't make any difference what side of the bed you got out on. When you begin to move through the rest of this day, you find yourself moving and living as somebody who is tremendously blessed, favored, and loved by God. In fact, you hear something that just rearranges your whole thought process for the whole day, and you just live on cloud nine all day long today. You're just so full of joy, so full of peace, and you can't exactly put your finger on it. It's just that, hey, I'm just at rest today. I'm just so full of the peace of God. And so it just impacts your attitude. It impacts how you interact with people all day long. And it's such a marvelous kind of experience that people have when they come into your space that they might ask you, what's the reason? Why are you like you are today? What happened? Did you win the lottery? I mean, what happened? Did you get a promotion? What is the reason for this joy that you have? And you'll be able to say, something, I just found out the truth about myself. I found out that I was fashioned and made in the very image of God himself. I found out that I can declare the glory of God in a way that nothing else can. That as you and I look around today and see the brilliance of the sun, the crystal clearness of the blue sky, and as we can see and know and understand that the heavens and the earth declare the glory of God, I found out today that, hey, there is a level of God's glory in me and about me so that I can glorify God. God can be glorified in my whole life today. In fact, I can eat and drink to the glory of God. I can walk to my desk in the glory of God. I can do my work to the glory of God. In fact, I can work as unto him and not unto my supervisor. I can revolutionize my whole persona about my job, my vocation, my office, my space. My space can be a heavenly space. Yes, it can be, and that's what I'm enjoying right now. I'm enjoying my heavenly space right here, right now. Yeah, that could be your testimony today. That could be your story today. Yes, that can be mine today. And so these words that come out of Jesus' mouth, if we believe that he is speaking truth, that he's not a liar, that he doesn't exaggerate, that when he says truly, truly, that he really means truly, truly, that he's underscoring, that he's emphasizing that what he's about to say is worth you and I paying as close of attention to it as we possibly can. And so he says, I am the light of the world. And he that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. Now, I tell you, that is a marvelous truth that he is saying, that he's putting out there. Now, again, if you think he's a liar, if you think he's just a figment of somebody's imagination, if you think he's a great deceiver, then you can just dismiss this and just move on. But if you happen to be among the many and many persons who believe that Christ is, in fact, telling the truth, that he's speaking the truth, that he's a great teacher, even if you haven't gotten to that space of being able to say he is, in fact, the very Son of God, if you just realize he's a great teacher, then you can embrace what he's saying. He's saying, I am the light of the world. Yes. He's saying in the midst of all this darkness that is happening all around, that he is the light of the world. He brings light to the world. He brings vision and sight. He brings the ability to be able to see to this whole wide world. Now, I love this because, again, it transcends all of the little divisions and separations that we cause or we live out in some of our minds and whatnot. So I need to adjust that and saying we, that many persons, because there are a lot of persons who have transcended this divide that's so prevalent throughout the world today: racial divide, cultural divide, locational divide, heritage divide, and all that kind of stuff. And be able to see, wait a minute, Jesus saying, look, I'm the light of the world. I don't care what your race might be. I don't care what your culture may be. I don't care what your religious upbringing might be. I don't care what your tradition may be. I don't care what your heredity is. I don't care about that at all. He's saying, I am the light of the world. I'm the light for every single race, every single culture, every single nation, every single language, every single people, every single person. It gets right down to the individual person, every 7 billion people who is alive today, who is vastly different from one another. God says to each and every single one of us in Christ that he is the light of the world. He is your light. He is my light. He can become the light of whosoever will. Anybody can see him as their light, as their guide, as the one that illuminates their whole world, their space, my space, your space, the space that you exist in, the space that you live in today. It can be illuminated by Christ himself. He can light you up. Yes, he can. He can make it possible for you to see, to know, and to comprehend. He is that light. Yeah. Yeah, I am the light of the world. His light is broad enough to encompass the whole wide world, but it can be so personal that it can light up your space. The space that you move in, the space that you live in, the space that defines your existence, where you're at. He can light that up. In fact, he does light that up. Yes, he is big enough and broad enough to be the light of the world, and he's personal enough, intimate enough, small enough to be able to light up your space. So you can have the same light. Yes, the light that I enjoy, the light that lights up my space, you can have that same light lighting up your space, lighting up your world, because he is the light of the world. And he goes on and says, he that followeth me shall not walk in darkness. That's amazing. In fact, it's so logical when you and I embrace the first part of it. If he is, in fact, the light of the world, if he's the light of your space, he certainly is the light of my space. Then if I follow him, if I follow this light, if I follow the light of the world, if I follow the light that lights up my space, I shall not walk in darkness. I love this. The world does not have to walk in darkness. Your nation doesn't have to walk in darkness if it's following Christ. And guess what? you and I as individual persons don't have to walk in light. In other words, I can have the specific light that lights up my space so I can see the direction that I'm going in. It can give me a greater understanding of my purpose. When I just say that God has a purpose for my life, that don't mean nothing if I don't know what it is. If I can't see what that purpose is, you telling me that God has a purpose for my life doesn't do me too much good. It helps me to know that I have a purpose, but it doesn't help me in understanding what that purpose is. Yes. And so Jesus, he comes along and he can tell me, he can illuminate, he can light up my space in such a way that I can know what my purpose is. And you know what is so amazing is that because he's lighting up your space, you're able to see your purpose and nobody else might see it. In fact, truth be known, probably that's the case where nobody else will really know what your purpose is unless you tell them. And you can't tell them unless you see it because of what Christ is doing in you. This is what makes him so personal to you and to me, that he is the light of my life, that he is the source of my joy, that he is the cause of my peace, that he is my all in all. And so he shows to me, he tells me, yes, what my purpose is. And I thank God I'm doing it right now. Yeah, I love being able to share this about Christ. I love being able to share good music. I love to be able to do like Sunday afternoons with Don Curtis on WRB-FM radio from out of England. I love doing that. I love that kind of music. I love being able to do that. I love mingling with the other presenters and whatnot, even though I've never personally met them, but I'm a part of the team, and I'm grateful and thankful to be a part of the team. Yes. And so that's part of my purpose. He's making that plain to me so I can move in it. I can excel in it. I can grow in that. And nobody else might not be able to understand or see it. In fact, there have been times when I've tried to encourage other folk to get involved in podcasting and teaching and that sort of thing. But, hey, it wasn't their thing. It was my thing, and I was trying to get other people to copy me, not just necessarily copy me, but do the same kind of thing I'm doing. But see, I was trying to help somebody else see what their purpose was, and that's not my place. My place is to know what my purpose is, to let Christ light up my space, and for me to live in my space, enjoy my space, and let you enjoy your space, and let you see the light that God has given to you for your space, for your life, so that you'll know firsthand yourself what is your purpose, and what it is that God wants to do in your life and through your life, to you to know that, first of all, I can give glory to God. I can live to the glory of God, that I can declare, that my life can declare the glory of God in ways that nobody else's life can. For you to know that, for you to embrace the fact that, wait a minute, God has made me. I'm created in the image and the likeness of God. Jesus Christ has redeemed me from sin. And I'm not talking about behavior. I'm talking about relationship. I'm talking about darkness. I'm talking about you and I understand that, wait a minute, God has made us in his image and his likeness, and sin is when I fall short of that, when I don't act like him, when I don't talk like him, when I don't think like him. And he has designed and made me so that I can be like that. And anything that robs me of being able to live that way is sin, and Jesus has come to deal with that once and for all. And he gives us an example of this when he talks to this woman, says, I'm not going to condemn you. I'm not even going to accuse you. I've come to call you out and to call you woman and say, go and sin no more. Go and live like the woman I designed and made you to be. And so he says that to you and says that to me. Hey, Don, go and be the man I made you to be. He calls your name out, whatever it is. Say, hey, go and be the woman. Go and be the man. Go and be the person that I designed you to be. Go and live in such a way that you bring glory to my Father, that you bring glory to your Father, because my Father is your Father. My God is your God. Yes, your original design. Jesus says, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness. Listen to this. But shall have the light of life. You'll have light in your space.
Undefiled. It's the knowledge preserved in the heart of what a new essence made us from the very start.
Yes, original design, Marianne Rappe from out of South Africa. Good morning to you.
What sins of pressure could never change was the Father's likeness in which we'd been made. Christ became for us wisdom from God, the unmixed knowledge of our original design.
Yes, your original design, my original design, yes. We were made to fit into that. We were made to live that. We were made to live it out so naturally. Yes, takes no effort at all. You just being you and me being me. But being it with an understanding that God made us in his image, his likeness. So that your life, you being who you are, can bring glory to God. You can even eat and drink to his glory. Yes. You can listen to music to the glory of God. You can write a letter to the glory of God. You can work to the glory of God. In fact, whatever you set at your hands to do today, do it as unto the Lord and not as unto men, giving God thanks and praise because he is the one who's given you life and breath for today.
There's a table that's been prepared for you, a feast of fat things for you to enjoy. Feel the welcome of one who adores you. Feel at home in your original design.
Yes, feel at home in your original design. Yes, feel at home being you. Let Jesus light up your space. Let him be the light. Let him be the illuminator. Let him show you what your purpose is. Yes, so that you can enjoy it to the max. Good morning, Mechanicsville.